What's going on, everyone? Daniel here. Today I'm going to be talking about the episode that changed SpongeBob forever, and that is Good Neighbors. Season 4 is not considered the worst season of SpongeBob, but in a lot of ways it was the downturn of what the show became, and Good Neighbors is just a microcosm of that. See, there's a lot of good video essays about what made early SpongeBob work so well, and the biggest reason, in my opinion, was because of the dynamic between Squidward and SpongeBob. See, in a lot of ways, they're very similar characters. They both have dead-end jobs, they both have passions that they're not very talented in, and they both are adults, but with very, very different perspectives on life. Of course, Squidward is the adult view, the one, we all don't want to have, but in reality, we all look at Squidward, we all agree, yes, I can see where you're coming from. But SpongeBob is the childlike view, the view we saw as a kid that we all want to strive for, even as an adult. And their dynamic brought us some of the best episodes of SpongeBob we've ever seen. And they tried to mimic that later on, but the problem is that they weren't very creative when they did it. And that, I think, is what made early SpongeBob work so well, was because it was creative, it was original. They weren't trying to copy something else, but these new writers were. And we see that with Good Neighbors. See, we've seen this dynamic before of their three neighbors here, SpongeBob, Patrick, and Squidward. We've seen that dynamic work before. But in this one, it doesn't, because they try to copy what worked, but the writing wasn't as good, and SpongeBob and Patrick just came off as very irritable and annoying. We see the dynamic of these three characters in the episode Jellyfishing, which of course gives us one of the best memes.
Firmly grasp it in your hand. Firmly grasp it. Firmly grasp it! That ought to do it.
And it works so well because the writing worked so well, and it was creative, it was original, and they try to mimic it with Good Neighbors, but it doesn't work, like I said, because SpongeBob and Patrick just are unbearably frustrating to watch. Also, this is where we see the Flanderization of our favorite characters, and the definition of Flanderization is...
Flanderization is the act of taking a single, often minor action or trait of a character within a work and exaggerating it more and more over time until it completely consumes the character. Most always the trait/action becomes completely outlandish and it becomes their defining characteristic.
All these characters became one-note caricatures almost of what their former selves were, and unfortunately this episode shows it off to perfection, and not in a good way. SpongeBob and Patrick just became people for Squidward to babysit, basically, and by the end of the episode, you're just frustrated. You're just like, Squidward or SpongeBob and Patrick, just stop, please. You're being annoying. Squidward, I understand. I actually get it. I would hate to be neighbors with these two. They are the most frustrating neighbors in the world because they don't leave you alone ever. This episode starts off as any normal SpongeBob episode would. It's our three neighbors, all three houses, one long shot, and we've seen that before. And then SpongeBob's alarm goes off. Again, we've seen that before. The difference is this time, SpongeBob runs right over or ends up basically in Squidward's house, waking him up for work, even though it's Sunday. It's just... You're just, from the beginning, you're like, oh, yep, SpongeBob is going to be the most frustrating character in this entire episode. I can tell right away. And we see SpongeBob and Patrick throughout the entire episode annoy Squidward to the point where he just needs to get them out of the house, and he orders this electronic, security thing, but then ends up messing everything else up. And some people might say, oh, that's Squidward getting his comeuppance for trying to kick his neighbors out. Yeah, they deserved it. Don't get it twisted. SpongeBob and Patrick absolutely deserved what they had coming to them, but they're too naive to realize it and too dumb to realize it. And that is a microcosm of what the show became, unfortunately. The characters just became dumb. They weren't well written anymore. The writers were just trying to copy what worked so well in the early seasons. So it just became frustrating. Even though I grew up on these episodes, this should be the nostalgia for me. This should be what I pull quotes from. And it's very interesting how everyone has the agreement that early SpongeBob is the best and the movie. But it's also interesting how nobody quotes those older episodes. Maybe it's because by the time those older episodes, all the people that are quoting it right now that are in my life, the 20, 21-year-olds, watched just those early SpongeBob episodes, even though I watched like season 4, season 5, and I kind of stopped after that because I realized, yeah, the show went way downhill. Maybe that's why, maybe it's all nostalgia, but I think it's just because simply the writing just became worse. And like I said, they were just trying to copy what worked so well in those early episodes. That's not to say this episode doesn't have some funny moments. It absolutely does. And I'm also not trying to say that if we remove this episode from all of the show would have been great, perfect, and it would have been awesome. No, the show was going downhill. Any show was going to run out of ideas, especially a show like SpongeBob. It's not a formulaic show, and I think that's what made it so popular, what made it so work so well, and now what makes it so popular with adults is because it's so creative and you don't get bored by watching. There's so many episodes to watch, you don't get bored because it's not all the same. But the problem is, you're eventually going to run out of ideas. There's only so much you can do with these characters. They're not made for this 12-year show like it's became. And what do? They appeal to the kids because the kids are going to keep watching, not the adults, unfortunately. And that's exactly what they did with this episode. The kids, like, I enjoyed this episode when I was younger. And looking back, I'm like, wow, this is one of the most frustrating episodes I've ever watched. And it's kind of sad, actually, that this is what the show became. At the end of the day, if SpongeBob ended after the first movie, I think we all would have been sad, we all would have been confused, but obviously hindsight's 2020. Looking back, I think we could all agree, if SpongeBob ended after the first movie, it might be considered the best animated show of all time. I don't think that's a question. I don't think that's a hot take at all. Maybe not the best, but one of the best. Certainly the best Nickelodeon show of all time. Some people consider it that already. They just kind of forget about anything post season 3 and the movie, basically. Season 4 to Bob, no one talks about. And this episode, Good Neighbors, is unfortunately just a microcosm and what ruined the show for a lot of people, including me. And, I have no interest in watching this episode again. I rewatched it for this video, and I'm like, wow, never again. I just hated it. Even though and it's funny because looking at it, thinking about it right now, I'm like, wow, there are a lot of moments in this episode that I've seen before in other, like the Magic Conch show. We saw this similar club type aspect, but again, the writing, the originalness of it worked well because it was new. And the new writers that they brought in after Hillenburg left and all those writers left just tried to copy what worked. And unfortunately, they weren't able to recreate that magic. Let me know, what is your least favorite episode of SpongeBob? What is your favorite episode of SpongeBob? For me, it's Band Geeks. I know that's a cliche. I get it. What's yours in the comments below? Or what do you think about SpongeBob as a whole? What do you think about Good Neighbors? Let me know in the comment section. Thank you so much for watching today's video. If you guys liked it, please consider hitting the like button, subscribing, and turning the post notifications on as well to never miss another upload. And I will talk to you guys on the next one. Goodbye, guys.